The Riverside Diner sits at the corner of 5th and Madison, neon signs reflected in puddles the color of old bruises. At 3:22 in the morning, the rain falls in sheets that sound like static on a broken television. The door crashes open. Elena Vasquez stumbles through, soaking wet, her black maid's uniform clinging to her frame like a second skin. She is 27 years old but carries the exhaustion of someone who has lived twice that long. Her dark hair, usually pinned neat, hangs plastered across her pale face. Blood seeps through her white apron, spreading slowly from a gash along her ribs where Tyler Brennan's fist connected 2 hours ago. The smell of cold rain and stale coffee mingles with something else, the metallic tang of her own blood. She collapses into the corner booth, trembling violently. The checkered floor beneath her feet is water-stained and worn. She clutches something in her shaking hands. An eviction notice. The deadline is stamped in red ink. 12 days. That is all she has left. In her coat pocket, $5. That is the entire sum of her existence right now. $5. The diner is nearly empty. An old man at the counter nursing cold coffee. A waitress with tired eyes who does not look up. The fluorescent lights hum with a sound like insects trapped in glass. Elena's breath comes in short gasps. Her ribs scream with each inhale. She tells herself it is not broken. It cannot be broken. She cannot afford broken. Through the neon-stained window, she sees them. 3 men in dark suits standing in the parking lot. They have cornered a teenager against the dumpster at the far end of the lot. The boy cannot be more than 15, skinny, terrified. One of the men has a gun. The barrel hangs loose at his side like a casual threat. The boy's mouth is moving. Begging. Elena watches. She should not watch. She should sit here quietly in her corner booth and count the hours until her next shift begins. She should not get involved. Involvement has never helped her. Involvement has only ever cost her more. But the boy's face. His eyes. Something in them reminds her of Micah. Her son. 5 years old. At home right now with her mother, sleeping in a bed that smells like mildew because the roof leaks and they have no money to fix it. Elena stands up. The pain in her ribs explodes like a detonation. She does not cry out. She has learned not to cry out. She walks toward the door. The waitress finally looks at her, eyes widening. Honey, don't go out there. But Elena is already moving. The November wind tears through the parking lot like a blade wrapped in ice. It cuts through her wet uniform immediately. Goosebumps erupt across her arms. She walks directly toward the 3 men. Each step is agony. Each breath is sharp and metallic. She stops between the boy and the gun. Leave him alone. Her voice is barely a whisper. It trembles like a candle in the wind. The 3 men stare at her. For a moment, there is only the sound of rain and the distant hum of the city sleeping. Then one of them laughs. A harsh, ugly sound. Get out of the way, lady. No. The man with the gun steps forward. Rain drips from his dark hair. His suit is soaked. He is massive, probably 6'3", with shoulders wide as a doorframe. When he raises the gun, it is not pointed at the boy anymore. It is pointed at her. Last chance, he says. Elena does not move. She does not speak. She just stands there, a trembling woman in a soaked maid's uniform, blood seeping through her apron, protecting a stranger's child with nothing but her body and her refusal to bend. A car door opens. Across the street. Slow and deliberate. The sound cuts through everything else. A man emerges from the darkness. He is tall, probably 6'2", and moves with the precision of someone who has never wasted a single motion in his entire life. His suit is charcoal black, tailored, worth more than Elena's annual salary. His dark hair is slicked back from a face that looks like it was carved from marble. He has a scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone. His eyes are storm grey and utterly empty. Nico Caruso is 38 years old and has spent the last 20 years building an empire on the foundation of vengeance. Behind him, a second car opens. Two men emerge. Rocco, broad-shouldered and scarred along his jawline. Sal, younger, faster, with eyes that miss nothing. They move without speaking, without running, without any indication of urgency. Simply walking. Walking across the street like they own it. Because they do. The three armed men freeze. The one with the gun does not lower it immediately. For a moment, there is a terrible stillness in the parking lot. The rain continues its percussion against the pavement. Elena can feel the gun pointing at her back. She can feel her heart trying to break its way out of her ribs. Nico Caruso stops 10 feet away. He looks at the three men. He does not look at Elena yet. When he finally speaks, his voice is deep and solid like an oath. Like something that cannot be broken because it was never meant to be negotiated. The gun. Put it down. The man's hand wavers. Rocco and Sal stand perfectly still on either side of Nico. They do not need to move. They do not need to draw their own weapons. The physics of power are already perfectly calibrated. Everyone in this parking lot knows it except Elena. The gun lowers. Run, Nico says to the three men. Not a yell. Not a threat. Just a statement of fact. Run now and maybe you make it home tonight. They run. The one with the gun first, then the others, abandoning any pretense of organization or courage. They scatter into the rain like cockroaches exposed to light. Their car starts in the distance. Tires screech against wet pavement. Then they are gone. The parking lot goes quiet. Just the rain now. Just the wind. Just three men and a woman and a boy, all soaked through, all standing in the blue glow of the diner's neon sign. Nico Caruso turns toward Elena Vasquez for the first time. His storm-gray eyes find hers. In that moment, Elena does not yet know that this man has spent the last 3 weeks watching her. She does not yet know that her mother mentioned her to his housekeeper in passing. She does not yet know that he has seen the way she moves through his mansion, invisible and silent, cleaning rooms while his men conduct business. She does not yet know that something in her refusal to bend reminds him of the only thing he has ever truly loved, his own father, dead for 24 years, murdered by a rival when Nico was only 14 years old. She only knows that she is terrified and bleeding and this man is looking at her like she is the most interesting thing he has ever seen. Go inside, he says to the boy. Tell the waitress to call your mother. The boy nods and runs. He disappears through the diner door. Now Nico is alone with Elena. Rocco and Sal have stepped back toward their car, giving them space. An honor, perhaps. Or a warning. What is your name? Elena. Her voice cracks on the single syllable. Elena Vasquez. You are hurt. I am fine. No. He steps closer. She can smell him now, expensive cologne mixed with rain and something darker underneath, something that smells like power and consequence. You are bleeding. You are shaking. Your ribs are probably cracked or broken. You are holding yourself wrong. She does not know how he sees these things so clearly. She has practiced hiding them for years. Who hurt you, Elena Vasquez? She should not answer. She should lie. She should say she fell. But something in his voice, something that sounds like it understands pain on a cellular level, makes the truth come out. Tyler Brennan. The rain continues to fall. Nico Caruso's expression does not change. But something cold and dangerous stirs in his chest. Something that sounds like thunder preparing to strike. He files the name away. He will not forget it. He never forgets. Come, he says. I have a doctor. We need to make sure nothing is broken. I cannot. Why not? Because she has responsibilities. Because she has Micah waiting at home. Because she has only $5 and cannot afford to miss her shifts. Because men like this man do not help women like her without expecting repayment she cannot possibly afford to give. But she does not say any of this. Instead, she says, "Thank you for helping the boy." "I did not help the boy." Nico's storm grey eyes move back to her face. "I helped you." Before she can respond, before she can tell him that makes no sense, before she can ask why, the night air splits with the sound of sirens. Police cars turn onto 5th Street, lights flashing red and blue against the rain-slicked pavement. Nico glances at the diner. The old man at the counter must have called them. Or the waitress. It does not matter. What matters is that there are now complications. "Rocco," he calls. "Get her medical attention." Quietly. Rocco nods and opens the passenger door of their car. Elena stands frozen. The police are getting closer. The sirens are getting louder. In about 30 seconds, they will round the corner and find her standing in a parking lot with 3 men who radiate danger the way other people radiate warmth. "Go," Nico says. Not a request. And Elena, moving on pure instinct and the strange certainty that refusing this man is not an option, walks toward the car. She climbs into the passenger seat. Rocco closes the door. The car pulls smoothly away from the curb just as the police cars round the corner. Through the rear window, Elena watches Nico Caruso speaking to the police officers. She watches him lie with such perfect ease that even she almost believes him. A misunderstanding. A gang of boys. They ran off. Everything is fine. The car turns left. The diner disappears. The neon sign fades into the November darkness. Elena touches her ribs. The pain is still there. The bleeding has not stopped. But something else has started. Something she cannot name. Something that feels like the moment just before everything changes. In her coat pocket, her fingers brush the eviction notice. 12 days remains. But now there is something else. Something that was not there 3 minutes ago. A possibility. A crack in the darkness. A single hand reached out in the moment when she was drowning. 3 weeks before that November night at the Riverside Diner, before the sirens and the rain and the impossible decision to climb into a stranger's car, Elena Vasquez stood on her hands and knees on the marble floor of the Caruso mansion, her black and white maid's uniform soaked through with sweat, a soft cloth gripped in her trembling fingers. The hallway stretched before her like a cathedral of wealth, 20 feet of polished stone the color of bone, catching the morning light through windows that cost more than everything she owned. She had been working this hallway for 6 months and had never once looked directly at anyone who lived in this house. Invisibility was her superpower. Invisibility was her survival. The sound of footsteps echoed from the east wing. Heavy boots. Men's voices, low and careful. Elena pressed her body flatter against the floor, her shoulders tensing, that old familiar fear rising in her chest like floodwater. She did not look up. Looking up was a mistake. Looking up meant being seen. Being seen meant complications. The footsteps grew closer. She could hear them now, distinctly. 2 men. One of them was Rocco. She had heard his name whispered by other staff members with a combination of respect and terror. The other voice she did not recognize, but it carried the same weight, the same dangerous certainty. "The numbers from the warehouse don't match," Rocco said. His tone was not angry. It was worse than anger. It was the voice of a man stating facts. Someone is stealing. The other man, tall, she could see his expensive shoes passing within 3 feet of her face, responded with a laugh. "Not from Nico. No one steals from Nico." "Someone is," Rocco said. Which means someone is either very stupid or very confident. "I have not decided which yet." Their footsteps continued past her. Elena remained motionless for a full 30 seconds after they disappeared, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape from her body. Only then did she resume her work, her cloth moving in slow circles across the marble, pushing the buffing solution back and forth with mechanical precision. This was what she did. She erased evidence of living. She made other people's worlds clean. She made herself smaller and smaller until no one remembered she was there at all. By noon, Elena had completed the hallway, the main staircase, and the library on the second floor. Her hands were raw from the cleaning solution. There was a small cut on her left palm that she did not remember getting, and it stung every time she squeezed the cloth. She made her way down to the basement staff room, a windowless space with grey walls, a fluorescent light that hummed like an insect, and a single round table where the other maids took their breaks. The room was empty today. Elena sat in the corner and pulled a brown paper bag from her locker. Inside was a sandwich she had made that morning from the last of the bread and a slice of processed cheese. She had made 2 sandwiches. One for her lunch. One for Micah's after-school snack when she got home. She bit into the sandwich and began counting the coins in her wallet. $5.73. That was everything. In this wallet, in this small leather pocket that she had owned for 4 years, lay the entire financial existence of Elena Vasquez. She had to stretch this money across for more days. Groceries, the subway card, the small utility bill that the landlord had warned her about 3 times. For days. She had done this calculation so many times that her fingers moved automatically, stacking quarters into piles of 4, stacking dimes into piles of 10. The rhythm was almost meditative. Almost peaceful. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her apron pocket. The screen showed an unknown number. A text message. I know where you work now. You owe me. We need to talk. Elena's hands began to shake. The coins scattered across the table, rolling in different directions like they were trying to escape. She read the message 3 times, each word moving through her body like a blade. The phone felt hot in her palm. She deleted the message immediately, but the words remained in her mind, etched there in a voice she recognized despite the distance between them. Tyler. It was always Tyler. She had not seen him in 6 months. She had not seen him since the night she packed a single suitcase and took Micah onto a Greyhound bus heading north. Since the night she had finally said no. Since the night she had refused to give him the money that did not exist and he had responded by driving his fist into her face hard enough to crack a tooth. That night, while she was bleeding in their apartment and Micah was crying in the bedroom, she had understood something with absolute clarity: staying was death. Staying was a slow funeral that her son would have to attend. Elena pulled her sleeves down, even though it was warm in the basement. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow at the edges, but they were still visible if someone looked closely. If someone was looking for them. She had learned to always wear sleeves. She had learned to always keep her hands in front of her face when someone was angry. She had learned to make herself smaller. To apologize even when nothing was her fault. To smile even when she wanted to scream. The sandwich tasted like cardboard now. She wrapped it back in the brown paper and placed it carefully in her locker for Micah. Then she climbed the stairs back to the main floor and returned to her work, her mind only half present. The other half was with Tyler, calculating distances and possibilities, wondering how he had found her. What she did not know was that Nico Caruso had been watching her. Not in an obvious way. Not in a way that anyone would ever notice. But he had seen her 7 days a week for 6 months, moving through his house like a quiet ghost, and he had noticed things. He had noticed the way she flinched when doors slammed. He had noticed the pattern of fresh bruises that appeared on her arms in spring and never quite disappeared. He had noticed the way she moved her body, protecting her ribs, protecting her face, protecting herself as if violence was something that might attack from any direction at any moment. Nico Caruso was a man who understood violence. Violence was the foundation of his empire. Violence was how he had survived his father's death at age 14. Violence was how he had built a network of businesses, both legal and otherwise, that generated millions of dollars every year. But he was also a man with a code. A man who understood that the world contained predators and prey, and that prey did not choose to be prey. They were hunted. Sometimes, a person simply had the bad fortune to be the kind of target that predators could smell from miles away. That afternoon, as Elena was finishing the library and preparing to leave for the day, Nico Caruso stood at the window of his study on the third floor and watched her exit through the service entrance. She walked with her shoulders curved inward, a posture of someone trying to disappear even while walking. The November light was turning grey, the sky filling with the particular heaviness that comes before rain. She pulled her thin coat around her body, the same coat she wore every day, the same navy blue fabric that had probably been navy blue once and was now almost grey from years of wear, and disappeared around the corner toward the subway station. Nico turned away from the window. Rocco was waiting for him in his office, along with Sal, his other lieutenant. Their faces were serious. There was a problem with the warehouse inventory. There was also a problem with a construction foreman named Tyler Brennan who had been asking questions around the city. Asking about a woman. A woman with a young son. A woman who had disappeared from her old neighborhood 6 months ago. Find out everything, Nico said. I want to know who he is. I want to know why he is asking. And I want to know by morning. Rocco and Sal exchanged a look. In 15 years of working for Nico Caruso, they had learned to read the smallest shifts in his tone. This was not business. This was something else. This was something that had wrapped itself around their boss in a way that neither of them fully understood. Is there a problem? Sal asked carefully. Not yet, Nico said. But there is going to be. The library was empty except for Elena. Late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across shelves lined with leather-bound volumes worth more than her monthly salary. She stood on the second step of the wooden ladder, reaching toward the highest shelf, her fingertips brushing dust from the spine of a first edition that probably cost more than her rent. Her maid's uniform, navy polyester with a small stain near the hem that she had tried to scrub out 3 times, stretched tight as she extended her arm higher. The fabric pulled back. The sleeve rode up past her wrist. That is when Nico Caruso walked in for a book he did not need. He had been in the mansion for 12 hours, handling business in his study, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice steady and cold as he discussed money and territories and the men who owed him loyalty. He had walked past Elena in the hallway that morning and she had flattened herself against the wall to let him pass, as if his shadow might consume her if she stood too close. He did not usually notice the household staff. They were the furniture of his life, present but invisible, the machinery that kept his world functioning. But he noticed her now. Not because of anything she did. It was because of what he saw. A scar, thick and raised, running from her inner wrist nearly to her elbow. Not one scar. Multiple scars, layered over one another like a map of repeated violence. The kind of scars that come from something held too tightly, something that cut and kept on cutting. Elena felt his presence before she saw him. Some part of her body understood danger the way a compass understands north. She turned on the ladder, her hand still raised, and their eyes met for the first time with real weight behind it. His eyes were dark grey, the color of winter water. Penetrating. The kind of eyes that saw things other people missed. Elena pulled her sleeve down so fast the ladder wobbled. She stammered an apology that came out as barely a whisper. She climbed down, her movements jerky and desperate, and rushed toward the door without looking back. Behind her, Nico Caruso stood motionless, the unread book hanging at his side, something shifting behind his expression like a knife turning slowly in the dark. He did not move for a long time after she left. When he finally lowered his arm, his hand was clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. That evening, Nico sat in his office on the 3rd floor. The space was masculine and severe, all dark wood and leather, with a single painting on the wall, a portrait of his father, a man with the same eyes, taken before the murder. Before the warehouse. Before the 14-year-old boy hiding behind wooden crates watched everything he loved shot dead on a concrete floor. Rocco knocked and entered without waiting for permission. That was the privilege of 15 years of loyalty. He was a broad man with graying temples and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, a reminder of a dispute in Atlantic City that had ended with 4 men in body bags and Rocco walking away without a scratch on anything else. "You wanted to see me?" Rocco asked. Nico did not look up from the papers on his desk. "The maid. Elena. How long has she worked here?" Rocco's expression did not change, but something flickered across his face, a question. The boss did not ask about household staff. The boss did not ask about anyone unless there was business involved. 2 years, maybe a little longer. She keeps to herself. Does good work. Why? Find out everything, Nico said. Where she came from. Who she was before. Any connections. Any debts. Any problems. I want to know everything. Rocco nodded slowly. Should I be concerned about something? Just find out, Nico said. Rocco left, and Nico turned to the window that overlooked the back of the property. Rain had started to fall, light and cold, the kind of November rain that carried ice in its fingertips. He thought about the scars. He thought about the way she had looked at him when their eyes met, the way she had looked at a man who could destroy anyone with a single phone call. She had looked terrified. But she had also looked like someone who had learned to be terrified so many times that fear had become just another language she spoke. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in a basement apartment in the Bronx, Elena sat on the floor of her studio with her son asleep behind her on a thin mattress. The room was small enough that if she stretched out her arms, she could almost touch both walls. Mold bloomed in the corner like an infection, black and spreading. The radiator clanked and hissed but produced almost no heat. She had draped every blanket they owned over Micah's sleeping form. He was 6 years old and had learned not to complain about cold. He had learned not to complain about many things. On her lap sat the eviction notice. The paper was already worn from being folded and unfolded 100 times. The text blurred when she looked at it. 12 days remaining. Then it had been revised. 9 days now. The property was owned by Victoria Ashford Property Management, and the amount owed was $47,000. Elena had counted every dollar, every penny, every possibility. She had worked double shifts for 3 months. She had eaten less so Micah could eat more. She had sold her mother's wedding ring, a gold band that was the last thing she had from her old life, the life before Tyler, before the apartment became a prison and her own body became a place of danger. $47,000. She had $5 in her wallet. Her phone buzzed. She almost did not look at it because she already knew. The screen lit up with his name. Tyler. She had not blocked him because blocking did not stop him. Blocking just made him angrier. Nothing stopped him. The message was 2 words, tomorrow. 10 p.m. Elena's hands began to shake. She typed back, I don't have anything to give you. His response came immediately, then I'll take what I want. She turned off the phone. She did not cry. She had learned somewhere along the way that tears were a luxury, and luxury was something that people like her did not get to afford. Instead, she pulled Micah closer and lay down on the floor beside him, fully clothed, and stared at the darkness until the darkness stared back. Meanwhile, in his office on Park Avenue, Rocco laid a file on Nico's desk. It was thick, comprehensive, filled with photographs and reports and dates and numbers. Nico opened it and began to read, and with each page, something shifted behind his eyes, something cold and dangerous and deliberate. 8 years of police reports filed in the Bronx precinct. 8 years of calls about domestic violence, assault, aggravated assault. 8 years of reports that had been filed in the precinct system and then removed. Vanished. As if they had never existed at all. The name on every report was the same. Tyler Brennan. 48 years old. Construction foreman. Connected to officers in the Bronx precinct, including a captain named Morris who owed money to Nico's organization. Photographs from hospital visits. A woman with a broken collarbone. A woman with bruises in the shape of hands around her throat. A woman with a gash above her eye that required 14 stitches. The woman in the photographs was Elena. Her face younger in the earliest photos, but her eyes already learning how to disappear. Below the hospital records was documentation from family court. A custody battle. Elena fighting to keep her son despite having no permanent address, no stable employment history, because the other party, the child's biological father, a man named Marcus who had served 8 years in federal prison for armed robbery, wanted full custody and had the legal resources to pursue it aggressively. And at the bottom of the file, a single photograph. Micah. 6 years old, with Elena's dark eyes and a smile that looked tired in a way no 6-year-old smile should ever look. Nico closed the file. He did not speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quiet and precise, the way it always was before he destroyed someone. Set up a safe house, he said to Rocco, who was still standing in the doorway. Something in Manhattan. Secure. Bring in the necessary security. I want it ready by tomorrow morning. Rocco did not ask why. He had learned 15 years ago that questions were a waste of Nico Caruso's time. He simply nodded and left. Nico remained at his desk, looking at the photograph of his father. He thought about being 14. He thought about the sound of gunshots echoing off concrete. He thought about learning, in a single moment, that the world was divided into 2 categories of people, those who had the power to protect what they loved, and those who did not. He thought about Elena's scars, and he knew exactly which category she belonged to. He thought about a 6-year-old boy sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a basement apartment, waiting for his mother to come home, waiting for someone to make the violence stop. The rain fell harder now, striking the windows like 1,000 tiny fists trying to break through the glass. The November rain hammered against the windows of the safe house like 1,000 tiny fists trying to break through the glass. Elena lay in an unfamiliar bed, her ribs wrapped so tight she could barely breathe, the white ceiling spinning slowly above her head. The sheets were silk. Actual silk. She had never slept on silk before. Her entire body ached with a deep, bone-crushing exhaustion that went beyond the physical. It was the exhaustion of 8 years collapsing all at once, of survival becoming unbearable. Through the wall, she could hear Micah's breathing. Steady. Peaceful. He was alive. He was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. A soft knock came at the door. Rocco stepped inside without waiting for a response, carrying a tray with soup and bread and a glass of water. He was a broad man with a scarred jaw and eyes that had seen too much. He set the tray down on the nightstand without speaking. How long was I unconscious? Elena whispered. 14 hours, Rocco said. His voice was rough, like gravel. The doctor gave you something for the pain. You needed sleep more than consciousness. Where are we? Manhattan. Upper East Side. Secure building. No one gets in without clearance. He turned to leave, then paused. Micah asked for you 3 times before he fell asleep. I showed him your photo from my phone. It helped. After he left, Elena tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every movement sent lightning through her torso. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning through the impossible events of the last 24 hours. A mafia boss. Protection. A safe house. It felt like someone else's life, a dream that would evaporate the moment she closed her eyes. But then she heard Micah coughing in the next room, and the dream became real. She forced herself to swing her legs off the bed, to grip the headboard and pull herself upright. The pain was white-hot and absolute. She moved toward the door, each step a negotiation with her own body. Micah was asleep in a small bed with blue sheets, clutching Elena's old sweater, the one that still carried the faint smell of her shampoo, the only thing that smelled like Mama. His dark hair was matted against his forehead. At 6 years old, he looked like he was carrying the weight of the entire world on his small shoulders. Elena sat beside him and touched his hair gently, careful not to wake him. She stayed there for 2 hours, watching him breathe, watching his small chest rise and fall with the rhythm of safety. When Rocco knocked again, it was 8:19 a.m. He looked different, tense, his hand resting near his hip where Elena knew there was a gun. "The boss wants you to stay in this room," Rocco said quietly. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "What's happening?" "Protection detail. Standard precaution." But his jaw was clenched and his eyes kept moving toward the window. Elena understood. Something was coming. She gathered Micah into her arms, careful of her ribs, and held him close. His small body was warm and trusting. She whispered into his hair, "Mama's here. Mama's got you." The silence of the safe house pressed down like a weight. Rain continued its assault on the windows. Elena sat on the edge of the bed with her son and waited. At 9:03 a.m., the front door exploded inward. The sound was violent and absolute, the crack of wood splintering, the shriek of the frame giving way. Elena's entire body went rigid. Micah jerked awake, confused, reaching for her. "Mama." His voice was small and frightened. "Sure, baby, sure." Elena pulled him closer, her mind racing. She knew that sound. She knew exactly what it meant. Tyler's voice boomed through the apartment, slurred and rage-soaked. "Where is she? Where is that little whore?" Elena's hands began to shake. She could hear him moving through the apartment, could hear Rocco's voice, calm and measured, trying to slow him down. But Tyler was past the point of slowing down. His footsteps were getting closer. "Come out, Elena. I know you're here. You think you can run from me? You think some gangster is going to protect you?" His laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "I own you. I own every scar on your back. You belong to me." Elena moved Micah to the corner of the room, behind the bed, and whispered, "Stay here. Do not come out. No matter what you hear. Do you understand me?" "Mama, no." "Micah. Look at me. Stay here. I love you." She turned toward the door just as it slammed open. Tyler Brennan filled the doorway like a disease. He was 48 but looked older, his face bloated from alcohol, his construction-worn hands curled into fists, the veins in his neck bulging with rage. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, the same clothes stained with her blood. His eyes found her immediately, and something cold and hungry sparked behind them. "There you are," he said softly. "Much more dangerous than the shouting. Did you really think you could hide from me?" Elena backed against the far wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her ribs screamed. The fear was old and familiar, 8 years of it had taught her body how to respond. Freeze. Make yourself small. Hope he tires of the violence quickly. But then she heard Micah crying behind the bed. "Mama! Mama!" Tyler's head snapped toward the sound. He moved toward the corner with the deliberate slowness of a predator who knows the prey cannot escape. "So this is the brat," he said, reaching over the bed. "Maybe I should teach him what happens when his mother makes choices about things that don't belong to her." He did not finish the sentence. The silence that followed was absolute. The rain stopped. The world stopped. Tyler's hand froze mid-reach as if someone had pressed pause on reality. Nico Caruso walked through the broken doorway like a knife cutting through air. Behind him came Sal and 10 men in black suits that cost more than Elena made in a year. They moved without sound, without urgency, filling the room with the presence of absolute power. Nico was wearing a charcoal suit with an open white shirt, his dark hair slicked back, his storm-gray eyes burning with a cold fury that made the temperature in the room drop 15 degrees. Tyler spun around, his face going pale. "You?" "Touch her again," Nico said, and his voice was ice, deep and solid like an oath carved into stone, "and you will not live long enough to regret it." Tyler's hand moved toward his waistband. "I know people. I have cops." Nico nodded at Sal, who stepped forward with a phone and pressed play. Tyler's own voice filled the room. A recording of him laughing on the phone, describing the exact amount he paid officers Martinez and Chen every month to bury Elena's assault reports. Federal offense. Corruption of public officials. Extortion. Racketeering. Tyler's face went white as bone. You already told them everything, Nico said quietly. The question is whether you want to spend the next 40 years in a federal prison thinking about this moment, or whether you want to spend it thinking about something else. Tyler stumbled backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish dragged onto dry land. He tried to run, to push past the men in black suits, but Sal grabbed his arm with the casual strength of someone holding a child. Tyler collapsed, trembling, whimpering. Nico did not look at him again. His eyes found Elena across the room, taking in the way she stood frozen against the wall, the way her chest was heaving, the terror still burning in her eyes. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, the way one might approach a wounded animal in need of gentleness rather than fear. He is gone, Nico said. He will never touch you again. Not ever. Behind them, Sal dragged Tyler toward the door, his screams echoing down the hallway. The other men followed, leaving only silence and the faint sound of rain beginning again. Micah ran from behind the bed and slammed into Elena's legs, crying. She scooped him up despite the screaming pain in her ribs, held him against her chest, and finally allowed herself to break. Her entire body shook as she wept silently into her son's hair. Nico waited. He did not speak. He simply stood there and bore witness to her devastation, understanding in a way that only someone who had lost everything could understand, that sometimes survival required more courage than any man could measure. The safe house settled back into silence. Outside, the November rain fell and fell and fell, washing the city clean. 1 year had passed since the November rain fell on Tyler Brennan's screams echoing down a federal prison corridor. 12 months of silence had settled over the city like fresh snow, and Elena Vasquez stood on a Manhattan penthouse balcony, watching the lights flicker to life across the Hudson River as evening descended. She wore a black dress that cost more than a month of her old salary, her hair swept up to expose the graceful line of her neck. No scars visible anymore. The scar tissue had faded to pale lines that only she could see when she looked in the mirror, and she no longer flinched when she saw them. They were not shame now. They were proof. Micah was inside the penthouse, running through the gala with other children, his laughter rising above the classical music like a bell ringing. He wore a small suit jacket, navy blue with a white shirt, and he looked like a child who had never known hunger. Because he hadn't. Not anymore. The charity event had drawn 200 people, investors, entrepreneurs, survivors, advocates. The House of Hope Foundation, Elena's organization, had distributed $500,000 to domestic violence shelters across New York this year. She had raised every dollar herself through her legitimate work managing Nico's real estate portfolio. A $10 million portfolio that had grown to $23 million under her careful stewardship. 3 months after Tyler's arrest, Nico had offered her a job. Not as a maid. As an executive director. You know what it is like to be powerless in housing, he had said, standing in the small apartment he had secured for her and Micah. 2 bedrooms. Windows that actually let in light. A kitchen where she could cook real food. When she walked into that space for the first time, she had sat on the bare living room floor and wept silently for 20 minutes. Use that, Nico had continued. Your pain. Your knowledge. Help people who are where you were. By month 6, she was presenting a tenant protection program to investors, Rocco and Sal sitting in the back row of the conference room watching with something that looked like pride. Her hands had shaken as she spoke, but her voice had not trembled. The program had raised $2 million in its first month. By month 9, she attended a school event where other parents treated her with respect instead of pity. The invisible maid had become visible. Elena Vasquez had a name now. A reputation. A future that did not depend on hiding. By month 12, she had saved $50,000 in her personal account. Not money Nico had given her. Money she had earned. She kept her old black maid uniform hanging in her closet, carefully preserved in plastic. A reminder. Sometimes late at night she would touch the fabric and remember the woman who wore it, and she would tell that woman, "You made it. You survived. You are free. But Nico had kept a careful distance throughout the entire year. He had been there when she stumbled in heels at a gala in March, his hand steadying her elbow, his face unreadable. He had sat in the back row of Micah's school play in April, arriving after the lights dimmed and leaving before they rose, though she had seen him there. He had sent a car to collect her when she worked late, but he never rode in it himself. He had attended board meetings for the foundation but always positioned himself where he could see her but she could not see him watching. 1 week after the one-year anniversary of the diner, Rocco and Sal stood in Nico's office in the building that housed his legitimate operations, a real estate management company that now employed 43 people. Boss is in love with her, Rocco had said, not even a question. Sal had nodded slowly. Yeah. And he will never tell her. Why not? Rocco asked. Because, Sal replied, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding, he thinks she deserves better than a man who has blood on his hands. Now, on the penthouse balcony where the charity gala continued inside, Elena stood alone watching the rain begin to fall. Gentle rain. November rain, though the calendar said December. She had learned to love rain instead of fear it. The balcony door opened. Nico Caruso stepped into the November evening wearing a black tuxedo with an open white shirt, his chest broad and powerful even in stillness. His dark hair held threads of silver at the temples that had not been there a year ago. His eyes held the same storm-gray intensity they always had, but something in them had shifted. Something softer, more dangerous in its softness. Neither of them spoke. The rain fell steadily between them, a curtain of silver thread. Inside, the orchestra played a piece in a minor key. Outside, the city hummed its eternal song. I never properly thanked you, Elena said finally. You don't owe me thanks, Nico replied. Elena turned to face him fully. Why did you do it? Really? Nico was quiet for a long moment. The rain intensified, spattering against the balcony railing. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like gravel under tires. I was 14 years old when I watched my father die, he said. A rival's bullet. Right in front of me. I screamed for help. I screamed until my voice broke. Nobody came. Nobody helped. He paused, his jaw tightening. I built an empire on that anger. 20 years of blood and revenge and power. And I thought it was enough. I thought survival was the same as living. But then I watched you walk directly into danger to protect someone weak. Someone you didn't know. Someone nobody cared about. And I realized. His eyes found hers. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. I wanted to be that hand for you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You changed everything. I have Micah. I have a career. I have respect. I have a future. Because of you. No, Nico said, shaking his head. You saved yourself. I just cleared the obstacles. You did the rest. Every single part of this, your success, your strength, your worth, that was always inside you. I just helped you see it. Elena stepped closer. The rain was soaking her hair now, running down her face, mixing with her tears. And what about you? What do you get out of this? Nico's voice was barely audible above the rain. Watching you stand here free. That is enough. Elena reached for his hand. His palm was warm despite the cold rain. His fingers closed around hers gently, as though she was something precious and fragile. Is it? She asked. Really? Their eyes held. The rain fell harder now, washing the city, washing everything clean. Inside the gala, through the glass doors, Micah ran past a window chasing another child, both of them laughing. Safe. Happy. Free. Rocco and Sal stood at the window watching the two figures on the balcony, rain soaking both of them, hands clasped. Sal's rough face creased into a smile. About time, he muttered. Rocco grinned. Boss finally figured out what we knew a year ago. Outside, Nico pulled Elena closer. She did not resist. She had stopped being afraid of safety. His hand moved to cup her face, brushing rain from her cheekbone, and then he kissed her with a gentleness that contradicted everything his world had taught him to be. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is not violence or money or fear. Sometimes it is one person choosing to reach out when they do not have to see someone the world has made invisible, to say you matter when everyone else says you don't. Elena Vasquez was not hiding a secret. She was hiding herself. Her pain. Her scars. Her worth. Because the world had taught her she had none. What Nico Caruso did was not save her. He reminded her she was always worth saving. And sometimes, that is all it takes to change an entire life. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.